Hello, everyone, and welcome to an episode of Trashfuture. It's the free one.
It's the free one.
Exactly.
Riley isn't even here to be irritated by that.
Can
I pretend to be irritated?
If you want to.
Yeah, let's do it.
Milo.
It's the free one.
Hey, stop that, you guys. Don't make me come over there.
So, as you can tell from Riley not being on this, he's in Canada. He's returned to his ancestral homeland temporarily. And but he did record a big, smart, important segment about big, smart, important things. And quite frankly, I haven't listened to it yet, so I don't know what the topic is.
We don't know.
We don't know because we haven't listened to it, and I'm the only one who's going to listen to it. But I figured Riley digging
He's
into
doing
the
that
heady...
thing where he goes steepling his fingers like, and can you just tell me, what is your name?
What am I doing here? How did I get here?
Is this my beautiful wife?
Is this the clock I just drew?
I figured we would absolutely have no problem delving into important intellectual topics, and so we should keep this episode extra stupid.
Having a cheeky delf.
Extra fun, extra for the hogs, because it's just going to be us. And if you heard a voice you didn't quite recognize, we are joined by our special friend, great friend of the show, Mattie Lubchansky. Mattie, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Like I was telling you before, I'm fresh off of dismantling the FBI.
Excellent.
With my friends in the Republican Party.
Thank you for your service. Did you hear? I'm just going to derail this immediately.
Let's go.
Not there's much of a rail to go on, but did you hear a guy in Ohio tried to get into the FBI's office in Cincinnati with a gun, was stopped, fled on the interstate, and at time of recording is now shooting at the cops from a cornfield off the interstate?
My culture is not a costume.
My official statement is that it do be like that, and I wish him not well, but not good luck.
I wish him a peaceful surrender.
So before we start on a very funny topic that is relevant to our lives and also about the most us kind of product ever made and sold, I did want to talk about something that's related to the UK really quickly, and I'm just going to run through some facts and figures because I feel like it's better if we both explain it this way and then also have with Mattie, who does not live in the UK, mercifully, to react to some of these things. So news came out earlier this week that utility bills are going to rise to an annual cap of £4,266 a year. That's an estimate, and that's also about a 60-odd% increase on the previous increase, which happened in April, which was a 57% increase.
Yeah, it's like a net sort of more than doubling from when things were, 1% more normal.
Right. And the Office of National Statistics in the United Kingdom estimates median earnings in the UK are about £31,000 a year. Median earnings, which can include family income. Meaning
it's fine because everyone got that like 200% pay rise recently.
Right. But,
of
but
course.
I want to just give a couple more facts here. So median earnings for people in wholesaling, retailing, hotels, and restaurants is about £21.5 thousand a year. And the London living wage, which is in some ways aspirational because people are definitely paid less than this, is about £20,500 a year. So this is to suggest the median earner in the UK would see utilities eat up 13% of their pre-tax income. That's the median. And if you work in retail and hospitality, it would be about 20%. Someone on the London living wage would see about 21%. And the Observer recently reported that about 11.5 million people will be spending more than a quarter of their net income, so post-tax income, on fuel by October.
Yeah, and in real terms, what this means is that there are a huge number of people who will flatly not be able to pay their energy bills.
Correct. And one of the things to point out is that many people are set up to have like an averaged bill, which is taken out in direct deposit at the beginning of the month. And we're already seeing reports of people getting rate rises and seeing direct debits going from, say, £200, £300 a month to £1,200, £1,500, £1,600 a month. In many cases, the people who have been reporting this have been saying, this is more than I earn in a month. And I'd also say, bear in mind, there's about 54 million adults in the UK. About 31 million of them earn enough to pay income tax. And so of that 23 million who do not, that not all of them are in work, but you have to consider for a second what that means. That's 20 million adults in the UK do not earn more than £12,570 per year of taxable income. And at the basic rate, the state pension is about £9,400 a year. But
it's like £100-something a week, right?
Yeah, £181 a week. You also pay income on even if your state pension income and other income sources are more than the personal allowance, which is $12,570, you pay income tax on that. So effectively, if you were earning from pension benefits, etc., exactly £1 beneath the tax threshold, the point at which you have to pay income tax, your annual cost would be a mere 34% of your pre-tax income.
This is why the whole sort of like generational conflict to allied class conflict thing has always bothered me, right? Is that like you can go, these boomers, they're killing the world, they expect us to pay for it. Which is, yeah, to an extent, if you average it out across the whole population. There's also a lot of them who are extremely poor and who are going to get killed by this. So
And something I want to point out really quickly is that, the finger pointing culprit here is people say it's the war in Ukraine, which is true in terms of international gas prices and spot prices.
Sure.
However, the UK produces about half of its natural gas domestically, and about 20% of the gas that is imported as liquefied natural gas. About 20% is imported via pipeline from Norway, and the rest are re-imports, which I don't really understand, but I presume is gas that is imported from other suppliers. That you don't audit the molecules, but
yeah, well, we don't have a lot of like liquid natural gas infrastructure in this country, bizarrely, and part of the reason for that is because we've been cutting it.
Yeah.
Well, why would you need gas storage?
Evil Vladimir Putin snuck into the heart of British government and made us cut all of our gas storage and also not build as much in the way of renewables or nuclear as we needed to.
He got you guys too?
He did. And the thing about it is that liquid natural gas imports in the UK are primarily from the US and from Qatar. About 12% of the UK's LNG imports are from Russia, which means Russian gas being cut off, or whatever you want to say, being more difficult to access or a shorter supply in Europe. That's only about 2.5% of the UK's gas supply. And about 30% of the UK's electricity comes from burning natural gas. So what we're basically in a situation is that, like Alice just said, everything's privatized. They've been cutting supply. Everything that they make, they just basically pay out in shareholder dividends and bonuses. The UK government refuses to intervene in any way that could stop private fossil fuel companies making as much profit as possible. And if this means forcing millions of people into absolute poverty and many more millions into relative poverty, they'll do it. And so far, Labour has proposed scrapping value-added tax on fuel bills, has also called for additional taxes on fossil fuel companies, but nothing concrete about cutting fuel costs or...
Keir Starmer isn't even at work. He's still on vacation.
He's on holiday.
With Riley in
I was going to say, he's presently on holiday, and he has said...
great things about the wines that come from the unique microclimate of the Niagara Escarpment, and I think it's very important that we don't lose focus on that in this difficult time.
Yeah, so he's basically said he's on holiday, he'll get to it. And meanwhile, British Petroleum has earned an 11-figure profit so far this year, or about $14.5 billion US. And there's one little note that I thought was very funny as I was researching these factoids, just to describe the situation in terms of this slow-moving catastrophe that we're heading towards, because it's basically, the BBC is going, doing infographics and saying, here's how you can take 1-minute showers and thus save 145 pounds a year, when, that is what, like...
Save a tenth of 1 month's energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But for the record, the UK gas supply system was not privatized until 1986. The UK electricity supply system was not privatized until 1990. And it's obviously been opened up to lots and lots of institutional investors and of funds and such around the world. And Alice, you might appreciate the fact that Scotland Gas Networks Public Limited Company, which is the transporter of gas in your part of Scotland, is 37.8% owned by the Ontario Teachers Pension Board.
Amazing.
Right.
Which is to say that the teachers who have suffered through Riley as a student are now getting their revenge on us.
Not on us, on me. On me specifically. Why am I paying for him?
The energy prices go up. It's like, oh fuck yeah, bud. gonna get a skidoo when I retire.
Going out for a ripeye, that'll be 1,200 quid. I mean, it's just I don't know how I don't get tired of saying the same very, very basic point all the time, every week, which is This is a market that shouldn't be a market. There's no reason. There was no sort of market-shaped hole here. It's been forced into being a market, and it's a very inefficient and very deadly way of administering things.
The only market we need is a pork market, and that's why
we're getting there.
Well, I guess I bring it up because, Mattie, I know that, for example, last winter, so 2020 into 2021, there was this insane price shock because of winter storms in Texas, in the U.S., and because of the way Texas works and because of the way that they sort of strong-armed people into these deals where you can get more or less your utilities at spot prices, there were people who were suddenly being hit by, $1,500, $2,000 utility bills for the month of January because of the winter storm. And it's not as much of like an immediate thing in terms of happening overnight and then going back to normal. What's happening here in the UK is it's being declared months in advance. The change happens overnight, and then it never goes back. And
it's sort of the chronic versus the acute.
My mind was kind of reeling when you were talking about the prices of things in a way that like, oh, that's what it's going to be. Like we have this number that it's just the cap is basically what it ends up being at, right?
Yeah. Ironically, that is a case of a controlled economy, right? Like it's a directed economy in that sense.
Yeah, and there's something about like, I feel like here when the gas prices go up or the heating prices go up, it's because of some freak thing that will obviously keep happening more and more for no reason that we can possibly describe or anticipate. But, when it happens, it's just sort of like, oh, well, something happened and now stuff's expensive. And then, it's not on purpose. This idea that I feel like this every time listening to the podcast, mostly just everything over there is just very much just like bad stuff is coming and we're not going to do a goddamn thing about it all the time.
One of the things that I think is perhaps interesting to compare this to in the UK is student tuition fees, because the UK didn't have tuition fees from basically the Attlee Labour government until 1998, and I'm pretty sure they didn't go into full effect until 2003. But they were introduced under Labour, of course, under Tony Blair. And in 2010, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I'm wrong because I wasn't in the UK, under the coalition government between the Tories and the Lib Dems, they raised the cap from 3,000-ish pounds a year to like 9,000-ish pounds a year for tuition.
Yeah, they did.
And they said, don't worry, this is just a guide price. Universities will charge whatever they charge, but this is not. And then what happened? British
if
friends,
any university is going to advertise, we're shit, we will take 3.
Yeah. And more to the point, what happened is all of the universities started charging £9,000. That and the sort of combined with the cuts to ESA led to legitimate student riots in London, which achieved nothing other than some long prison sentences.
Dave Gilmour's son went to jail for a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't remember the name of the guy, but I know there was an activist who was like seriously beaten and sustained brain damage from a cop, like a territorial support group cop beating his ass with an asp, like those like metal, but telescoping batons.
I thought you were talking about the snake.
He's Cleopatra pilled.
PC Cleopatra.
Yeah.
There's actually an insane, there's this Italian like pulp artist. I think he died recently or in the last 15 years, but he was in his heyday in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. And one of his insane pulp illustrations was like a bank holdup where they're holding a big snake at people. And they're just like, listen, motherfucker, give us all the money or this snake is going to bite you.
Yes. Yes.
Basically, that's the UK economy.
What about a gun that fires a snake? I think that would be effective.
Oh, there you go. Now we're talking. TM, no one else can do this.
Patent pending.
Yeah, I think anytime that you can introduce, you can turn something into a market when it doesn't need to be, and then introduce a price that everything's going to be at, and you can get the worst of every possible economy and type of organizational structure. I think you got to take that every time.
Yeah, it's a failure of planned economy and market economy at the same time.
It's so good.
Well, I want to talk about, I suppose, since we wanted this to be a fun episode as well as an episode where
this hasn't been fun. Hasn't been pensioners freezing to death in the winter and boiling in the summer.
But if you're boiling in the summer, like we are right now, if you got bitten by a snake that was fired out of a gun and you're thirsty, and your doctor says, "Hey, you need to make sure you drink a certain amount of water per day to get over your snake gun induced injury," I have found an object that will help you.
This is a beautiful segue.
It's called the Hydrate Spark. water bottle. And
I preferred hydrates,
it is
Mark.
You can never have enough hydration in your sparks.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing. It is an app-connected water bottle. It is a Bluetooth sensor-equipped water bottle. I'm going to say this in fairness. People use it because it can connect to fitness apps and it can tell you how much water you've consumed over the course of a day. However, it is equipped in its app with a sensor that will tell you how much water is left in the bottle, which is transparent.
Okay. Well, here's a question, Nate, for you. If you're going to be critical of everything, how else would you possibly know that the water is low or even high?
Well, I mean, quite frankly,
trying to drink from the water bottle.
Yeah, water famously is transparent, right? So you need this.
Yeah, that's right.
One of the issues that I have discovered with this, however, from reading reviews and, no joke, from joining the Facebook community centered around owners of this water bottle, well, I found out that in the United Kingdom, the 620 milliliter or 21 ounce version is 74 pounds.
Awesome. Worth every penny.
You could pay for up to a minute of electricity with that.
Yeah. I've discovered that that the sensor has to be set but calibrated by you filling the bottle up and then drinking it all and then pressing a button again so it knows where it's at when it's full and empty. Apparently, this sensor has to be reset a lot because it just goes out of whack. So people have reported everything from I drank a fuckload of water and it reported that I drank like 10 ounces of water today to my app thinks that I've drank 10 gallons of water today.
My app thinks I've got that MDMA brain condition.
I love the idea of just buying one of those digital kitchen scales that you have to like tear yourself every time.
Okay. Yeah. What you all need to understand, guys, is that if I didn't have this water bottle warning me when the water bottle was full of water, then I might think it was empty and then get really scared when I hold the water bottle up and I see a person's face through it and it looks all big and weird.
Yeah, when my water bottle is empty, what I like to do is to like celebrate that fact by inverting it over all of my sensitive electronics. But because water is transparent, that's usually a very risky prospect for me. But now I don't have to worry about this because it can tell me if there's water still in there, and I shouldn't do that.
And your sensor hygiene is great. You're always checking it.
Exactly,
that's important.
So I've also found
sensor ownership is so important.
I'm sorry, Matty. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's fine. It wasn't a good joke. Nobody laughed.
Well,
I was about to, but then someone talked over you.
See, this wouldn't be a problem if we were all hydrated.
That's true. We're all dehydrated. We're all cranky.
Yeah, I've got another
my glass of water is now empty, or is it? I don't know. There's no sense.
I'm actually the opposite. I've drank 14 gallons of water according to my smartphone, so maybe that I just have to piss so bad. That's why I'm in such a hurry.
I've actually hacked because I think everyone should know before the episode you sent us all a Hydrate Spark, so I've been using it obviously, and I've jailbreaked mine to also mine Bitcoin for how much water I drink. So I've drank 20 gallons of water today, and I am in the hospital right now. It's where I'm recording from.
Yeah,
it's like
I've jailbroken mine, so it works with Four Loko.
Yeah, vodka.
Right.
I've drunk 9 gallons so far.
So there are a couple of things on this device though that also make it extremely funny. So for one, it has an LED sensor, or rather an LED indicator on it that will start glowing. You can set it to remind you to drink more water, so your bottle will start glowing. However, apparently this is a feature that is only included on the Pro model, which is functionally the same as the regular model. And if you buy the regular model, you have to basically pay for DLC on your water bottle, or you can't control the LEDs. So basically, if you want your bottle to glow like a disco light, you gotta pay. I can't figure out because
you actually can and should jailbreak your water bottle. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. Instead of like getting a water bottle brought to you by WinRAR.
Yeah, water bottle wants to be free is what all the web guys are saying, right?
So another thing that I've discovered from it is that the app is somewhat unstable, and so I've gone through and looked on the Facebook community. A lot of people want to like join email friend groups based around this water bottle, which I find
desperately sad.
But there's one guy, this is from August 7th, his name is Mike, and he says, is there an app problem? I'm missing about 1.1 thousand days of my streak.
my water drinking streak.
Yes.
I think maybe gamification as a sort of a model has gone too far. If we can sort of abstract this idea of like a winning streak or like a sort of a streak of consistency to the thing that you have to do or you die, or one of the things that you have to do or you die. Because right now I'm on my like 31-year breathing streak. I'm feeling very good about it. I don't really need an app to like note that down. And I don't know. It's very strange to me.
I was very interested in some of these software problems because, me and Milo are no stranger to the fact that like a lot of times when you get devices that are notionally Bluetooth controllable or smartphone compatible, their apps tend to be really fucking shit. And we have experienced this with a heater in the studio, which is notionally Bluetooth controllable, but we regularly discover that either it's freezing cold in the wintertime because it hasn't turned on, or it's balls hot in the wintertime because it has turned on too much. But I was interested.
But now one of those is going to cost you £10,000.
Exactly. So we probably won't be using Bluetooth. But I noticed another comment in this group where someone had said that they'd updated the app to a new version. They're still getting the spinning circle next to water, which I don't know what that issue is.
My water is buffering.
My water is doing a blue screen of death. But he says that he's basically done everything he can, force closed the app because the app is freezing, restarted the iPhone, reopened the app, still the spinning icon buffering, logged out of app, repeated steps 1 to 3, still the same issue. And then one of the mods says, you can try deleting and reinstalling the app, also turning airplane mode on for 30 seconds to refresh the connection. And there is something like, I realize that's just garden variety troubleshooting, but there's something about I'm turning on and off airplane mode to be able to drink water from my bottle that just, I don't know what the right word is here.
It is dystopian, right? But it's dystopian in a very silly way, which is perfect for us.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a dessert after the regular savory dystopian stuff we had up first.
Yeah, it's like you now have no money and also no heating or cooling for that matter, and no electricity, but also you can't get into your special boy water bottle.
It's like that. Is it a Philip K. Dick story where the guys like pay money to unlock his own front door to leave? It's just that for a cup in your house.
It's Ubik, isn't it? Yeah, like
I think so.
Yeah, like to get out of his house, he has to put money in the door. Well, I mean,
I have to upgrade my heater to the Pro model to turn it off in the winter, so I don't pay $10,000.
Somebody shared a photo of this in the United States. They're selling these in a store at I guess a hi-fi store for $110 per bottle.
I'm buying one of these. I am putting it in the more like Hillary Clinton drink koozie, and I am achieving Buddha nature.
Alice, I have so much better for you than Hillary Clinton. I have seen, I mean, on one hand, there's your garden variety people have gotten theirs really done up with, sort of like hologram, rainbow colored, their name and stuff like that.
Laser etched portrait of Robert Mueller.
Like the t-shirt you would buy, the airbrush t-shirt you buy in Key West or something for like spring break. But I see another one where someone has gotten a koozie cover for it that makes it look like the world's biggest vape. And it says...
When did you buy this?
It says, God is within... With her, she will not fail, or something to that effect. But it's got the Hydrate Spark logo on it, so it seems as though it's been extremely, extremely customized.
I'm getting my Bluetooth water bottle lowered and getting hydraulics put in, and I'm driving it around.
I got like underlighting. Yeah. I love this. I love to consume. I love to be a consumer. It doesn't lead me to any strange or weird places. I say as I sort of engrave a bunch of my favorite quotes from my brother and me on my water bottle that won't let me drink unless airplane mode is off.
One of the things that got me about this is I understand because I use a fitness tracking app for just logging workouts, checking.
Yeah, I use one of those for leaking sort of operational information to my enemies.
Yeah, well, I was so excited by the Strava app that doxed a bunch of U.S. military bases in Syria. The reason why I came on the show in the first place and got connected to the whole thing, that I wound up getting a Strava-enabled thing to track my workouts. So if anyone wants to try to geolocate me, I suppose they can. But obviously, like, there's the thing where you can enter in any fitness.
It's like there's one user in East London who is just like jogging perfect laps of a tiny studio for 8 consecutive hours.
Yeah, he's just running up and down stairs nonstop trying to unplug things.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little peek behind the curtain there, because I have had the worst week in the world.
You've had a day.
Upgrading our studio computer, and you have been such wonderful good sports with this episode record time running a full hour plus longer than it was supposed to.
Oh,
because
it's always a joy.
Yeah, because I've been running, screaming, throwing, shitting, throwing up, crying, etc.
Yeah.
It was nice to get a peek behind the curtain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But according to Nate's water bottle, he's doing fine.
To see Nate shitting and crying.
Yeah. Well, like I said, if only I hadn't left my water bottle in airplane mode, I could have stayed hydrated throughout this process. But
what happened was, the reason why the audio kept not working is because it was all routing through your water bottle.
Yeah.
And crying, shitting, and throwing up can all be quite dehydrating activities. So you want to make sure.
Yeah, I got an idea, guys. It's one of those New Yorker cartoons where the guy's crawling through the desert, right? And he's dying because he's so thirsty. And another guy is saying, "Have you tried unplugging your water bottle and plugging it back in again?"
I would do whatever the sort of the New Yorker equivalent of numbers is.
Yeah, I think
it's like upwards of 3 sensible chuckles.
Yeah,
I would drink from my water bottle, but it won't pair with my Samsung Galaxy S7.
Dan 9 and in the desert.
Genuinely, the Samsung Galaxy tab joke gets me every fucking time. I'm not sure what to tell you. It's a known feature of my brain.
Dan 9 and come on the podcast.
Yes, please.
I don't know if any of you, either in your personal choices or from parents, family, etc., have bought stupid things and then regretted it, like something that seemed cool at the time. I feel like I'm not really prone to buying dumb shit, tech stuff, whatever, but I feel like I've never asked my mom if she's bought any insane devices, because I can only imagine that she must have. All I
do is buy dumb shit. All I have are useless trinkets. Yes, no, 100%.
1,000 times, yeah.
I was just going to ask if anyone, because like we can all agree that the Bluetooth connected, sensor enabled water bottle with disco lights you have to pay extra for. As one of the reviewers whose reviews I read on Amazon said, this is basically like buying a car and you have to pay extra to pull down the windows, which, to be fair, I'm sure is going to be
bringing that in.
I know, exactly.
Actually, no, some cars, there was some car that you had to get, you had to pay a subscription to get heated seats.
It was a BMW.
Yeah.
New BMW, yeah.
So I'm wondering,
my people hate to see it.
I would not buy a Bluetooth connected water bottle, but I'm wondering if you are willing to confess on this podcast, if this is going to be the you are not immune to propaganda zone when it comes to the tech industry and or gadgets. Have any of you bought devices that sounded cool and then you realize upon using them they suck?
Dumbest thing I've ever bought that was app enabled. It was a tactical Garmin smartwatch that was not very tactical, not very smart, and wasn't very good as a watch. It's not the dumbest thing you might imagine, but I did not need to have a thing on my watch to set for tracking my heart rate, just on the off chance I was going to go skydiving wearing it.
But Alice, what if you did do that?
That's true. If I did do that, I still have it. I would go and.
What if you fell out of a plane with nothing but your watch?
Well, the thing is, they would dig this watch out of a 5-foot deep crater that I had made, and like sort of pluck this off of whatever viscera remained, and see that my heart rate was like a steady 70 beats per minute the whole way down, ice cold.
Yeah.
Other than that, no, not much.
She hit her top speed of all time.
That's right. Yeah. New personal best at skydiving. Fastest time from plane to ground.
That has actually not quite that way, but that has happened to me where I've gotten a new personal best for speed of walking, and I realized I forgot to turn my walking app off when I got on the bus, and so it thinks that I'm fucking hauling ass down Old Kent Road on a walk.
Sort of last conscious action falling off a cliff is like turning on the like walking activity.
I mean, you're going to be at the top of the leaderboard on Strava if you do that.
Yeah, the Strava segment from top of cliff to bottom.
I feel like I get given a lot of like dumb gadgets by people, like parents or in-laws or whatever, like for like Christmas or birthday presents. Not so much anymore now that I'm 1,000 years old and I don't receive presents. But like, I feel like I remember like back when 3D printing was like new and exciting, my parents got me a 3D printer pen that I was really excited about. And it was a pen that was a 3D printer called the 3Doodler, I believe it was called.
Oh, wow.
Sounds like sort of two slurs at once somehow.
It sure does. And I was so excited. I was like, I like open it up. I'm like, I want to do so much shit. I'm gonna like, you know, like I want to become a multimedia artist. I want to like sell things at conventions that like are 3D printed drawings or whatever. And then I tried to use it, and the best I could do was like a little circle on my table that didn't even dry right. It was just like completely. It was a pen that would like extrude plastic through its tip while you like drew with it.
So it was basically like squeezing a caterpillar so it takes a shit.
Basically,
sort of doing like sericulture. Wait, fuck!
Yeah,
I remember another
jamming. One. Yeah.
I remember. Sorry, this is the whole segment is going to be like this because you'll say something, each of you, and I'll be like, "Yeah, I remembered another dumb thing I got." I got a sort of like very retro styled word processor, like it was a Wi-Fi enabled typewriter called a FreeWrite.
Yes,
extremely annoying, both to use and also to be seen using. But I did buy one, and I do still have it. So if anyone wants anything typewritten,
I've been eyeing one of those because every time I like sit down to write something, I'm like, what if I'm not? Because because then you start getting distracted, right? Which is the whole premise behind one of those things.
Here's the problem with buying anything that's sort of one of those anti-distraction things. You just go on your phone, unless you like lock your phone in sort of like a timed safe or something, which I refuse to do. You will just find other ways of distracting yourself. Anti-distraction does not work on me. I am distraction.
You were born in it.
That's right. Molded by it.
So now the question is, Mr. Milo Edwards, have you purchased any stupid tech things?
Well, I mean, as a BMW owner, I'm not sure if people will be surprised by this or not, but I'm not really much of a consumer. I don't really buy a lot of stuff. That's never really been a vice of mine. Like I like buying occasional big ticket items that I really want, like a car or like, I don't know, a new laptop or whatever. But like I don't really go in for like gadgety things. I spend so much money on food, like a huge amount of money on that. But yeah, I don't really own any trinket. I probably have been bought some real shit over the years.
Milo,
I think probably the dumbest thing I've ever been bought is it's like a little shelf type thing, like a phone size shelf with a hook over it, so that if you're charging your phone, you can hook it over the plug that's plugged into the wall, so your phone sits on I guess if you were using a really high in the wall plug socket to charge your phone. I can't really think of the
that's such an unusually specific gift. Like someone has been to your home, has been like measuring from wall sockets.
Well, they fucking hadn't, because I've never used it, not once. It was bought for me like over 10 years ago.
Now, Milo, all the money you spend on food, the plates you're eating the food off of, are they perhaps weight censored so your phone knows how many pounds of food you're eating a day?
I mean, that would be a good idea. But unfortunately, due to my cultural love of Greece, it would be a very expensive habit. So I'm always breaking the plates.
I have not been gifted or bought anything stupid in the tech realm. However, in the adjacent...
Look at you two. You're free of sin.
In the adjacent to this podcast, I did one time see an ad for, and this is really embarrassing, I saw an ad for what I would describe as vaporwave jumpers. And the designs looked stupid, but also very, very cool. And I said, well, fuck it. Why not? These are funny. I'll get them. In worst case scenario, we can wear them at a live show if they're things I would never wear. However, what I didn't realize was, I don't know how they were screen printed or what they were made from, but they looked shiny in a way that wasn't cool at all. And they also trapped heat unlike any garment I've ever worn in my life. They were
perfect
like
for this winter then.
a trash bag.
It's
So you
probably
can
made of
imagine us,
saran wrap. Yeah.
imagine us on stage under lights, just drenched in sweat.
That's why you need the bottles.
Exactly. So in a way, this was the perfect use case for the Bluetooth enabled water bottle that would tell us when to drink water.
I've remembered another one.
Oh no.
Okay.
Okay, so this isn't a tech product. It pretended to be a tech product. What I bought was a jacket that was supposedly very, very advanced because I needed a new jacket and I was willing to like splash out and spend a horrendous sum of money on it. And have this be like my one jacket and just make that my personality or whatever. And what it is it's a completely normal waterproof jacket, but it's made in large part of copper wire. So, and this is apparently because of like space reasons or Elon Musk or some shit like that. But so now I'm just wandering around wearing this admittedly very nice jacket, just going, oh, if it rains, I will be the most electrocuted a person has ever been.
You'll be the most green a person has ever been.
You're also,
I'm
you're also gonna
that
get
too.
like robbed. Someone's gonna like knock you out and strip your jacket.
I'm gonna get all of the copper wire stripped out of my jacket. I'm gonna get like heavy metals diseases that people like didn't even know that you could still get.
I feel like the copper wire thing is like some woo-woo shit. Like baseball pitchers will always be advertising like copper bracelets that they wear.
100%,
That, like, yeah,
100%. I think the deal here was this brand has the most annoying, most sort of like tech hipster copy you've ever read. It's a brand called Volaback. And if
I ain't no Volaback girl.
You
That's
are
what
you
I
are.
said too. And their vibe was, maybe it'll stop you from getting COVID. I guess money, please.
I love the idea of you being like, "Oh, Milo, your catalytic converter got stolen. Ha ha. That'll never happen to me. I'm wearing
your catalytic converter. Yes, that is
But it's
probably
reduced
like
the toxicity of Alice's emissions.
That's
by quite a
right.
lot, so.
This is probably my most like personally reprehensible purchase. And it's not strictly speaking a tech thing, but it's so bad in and of itself that I had to talk about it and expose myself. So I welcome my killing after the revolution.
But I would encourage it to go further.
Well, yeah, exactly.
I have to go because I've got to go and watch a show.
Well,
Have fun.
we're going to let Riley introduce his segment, and then we'll come back to say goodbye.
Well, thank you, past either me or past versions of my cretinous friends who will have potentially been taking over the hosting of the show while I am on a much-deserved holiday in Canada. So with all of the sort of japes and goofs behind us, we are going to be putting on our mortarboards and sidling into class because, once again, it is time to talk about what is becoming sort of a theme, actually, in terms of segments I like to do, which is to talk with an expert in their field about how some decision, often taken in the 80s or 90s, that involved blind faith in the market, a kind of religious commitment to Homo economicus idea of rationality, and also a gigantic handout to private interests, has created huge, politically charged and difficult to solve problems that we are dealing with now. And so on that subject, I am very pleased to be speaking with Dr. Craig Berry, the author of Pensions Imperiled, an authoritative account of the economy of private pension provision in the UK, and the UCL Institute of Public Policy head of policy, and associate professor in economic policy, a man of many titles and official qualifications. Craig, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I've been wanting to do this episode ever since I saw just a random CNBC headline, which said that many younger baby boomers, the sort of first generation who moved from a a pension where you just get a certain amount every month, move to a pension where you just sort of, your company kind of invests money on your behalf, you contribute to it privately. The 401k, it's called. We have something similar in the UK. Well, it's being found that as soon as that is now being relied upon by a wide cohort of people, they are about to, many of them are about to go broke in retirement.
That's right. I mean, the 401k system in the US is, I would say, it's broadly equivalent to the dominant form of pension saving in the UK, defined contribution schemes, insofar as they're both individualized ways of saving for retirement. As an individual, you essentially take all the risks, even if these schemes or these products are provided via your workplace, your employer. They're not in any sense occupational pensions. They're personal pensions wrapped up in different ways. And that essentially means that, on the surface, what you get out is what you put in, but what you put in goes through all kinds of different processes. As you suggested, it's invested in capital markets. Depends on you making some good decisions, or your advisors and your fund managers making some good decisions. Also depends on quite a lot of luck for you individually, but for the economy as a whole, how well your investments do. And then there are all kinds of risks involved, depending on how, irrespective of what kind of pot you end up accumulating over your working life, risks involved with what you do with that pot when you reach retirement too, where you may make the wrong decision, you may make the right decision, but get unlucky again. And you could end up retiring on, a much less secure sort of financial platform than you had hoped or anticipated.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think that's, for those, and we talk sort of sometimes, in the show, glibly, sometimes we'll see a piece of, commentary or whatever saying this will affect how millennials retire. And then we sort of scoffingly say, well, no, they won't, essentially, because many people simply do not have the security of a, number one, a defined amount of money that you just start getting when you turn a certain age. And that even if you do have that, as you say, you have to make enough money for it to be. You have to make enough money for you to start contributing. Your employer has to offer it. The idea of I think removing from market forces the question of, do I get to eat and have shelter after I stop working? That thing that we had for what was essentially an anomaly for sort of the middle part of the 20th century has been largely dismantled, right? And it was dismantled as I understand it, was dismantled in the 1980s, correct?
I mean, that's essentially when the dismantling began. If you take the UK, for example, Margaret Thatcher's government began undermining the traditional pensions provision, which you can, I mentioned occupational pensions. Technically, you would describe these defined benefit pensions, where there's a guarantee. You'll put aside some money from your earnings. There's a guarantee what that will result in retirement, or an approximate guarantee. And that pensions promise started to be undermined in the 1980s. In the UK and the US, take the UK, for example, the Thatcher government started, the first thing they did was to unravel the state pension system. So, you've got your private pension and your state pension, and Thatcher reduced the generosity and coverage of state pension systems by breaking the links to earnings indexation, essentially abolishing the second state pension system. And so people became more dependent on the private pension. At the same time, she there wasn't one big decision which ended the sort of traditional occupational pension system, but there was a series of steps. For example, Thatcher government allowed large companies, large employers with big pension funds to take contribution holidays. So a period of time they just stopped contributing to their employees' pension fund. There was, optimism about the health of the long-term health of the stock market, whereby investment returns themselves, even without employer contributions, would do the job of catering for people's retirement. The optimism proved short-lived. And she also allowed various systems of tax relief to apply to defined contribution rather than defined benefit pensions. Defined contribution schemes are those where we started, the individualized pension schemes. So employers were able to access the same tax reliefs by setting these schemes up, which they had absolutely no responsibility for in terms of the financial risks. Able to access the same tax relief as they had done previously when they were managing occupational schemes, where employers did largely, uphold the take care of the financial risks. This was, there was a broader context here. It wasn't. Let's not exaggerate the extent to which sort of policy has driven all of these changes. There was, deindustrialization. So a lot of the, large employers that had these large pension schemes, were in industries that were no longer as profitable. There was privatisation, and pensions was kind of a byproduct. Problems in the pension system were kind of a byproduct of privatisation. And also in the UK, you had the sort of spread of American ownership of British corporations, and which tended to be associated with the closure of the traditional pension scheme. So all of this stuff was happening without really any sort of deliberate attempt for it to have a pensions impact. But Thatcher government certainly helped the process along the way, and ensured that, in the 80s and 90s, there was essentially very little pensions coverage in the private sector once the traditional schemes started to close. And it was not until the sort of new Labour government in the UK of the 2000s, whereby the policymakers tried to do something about that and actually put people into these individualised schemes instead, building on the sort of small steps towards this that the Thatcher government had put in place.
So if I was to sort of try to understand this process in its totality, it would essentially be that the universe where you reliably have a decommodified form of being able to support yourself, to reproduce your life in your old age, was a product of, was just because it was taken apart by a lot of different factors. It was a product of sort of the mirror image of many of those factors, such as a largely Fordist economy, a Fordist economy that also had strong national trade union representation as well, and that had, let's say, a government that wasn't willing to sort of topple some of the institutional pillars of those things, but that as those things eroded, as for example, national trade unions lost their power, partly because of political intervention, partly because of also, as you say, the internationalization of the ownership of new kinds of companies and a new kind of economy. This thing that was won sort of very quickly kind of fell away. And would you say that's a sort of a way of understanding the process in its totality?
Yeah, I would say so. This was a period of capitalist expansion. To some extent we knew this at the time, but certainly in hindsight. I think there was a sort of systemic assumption that pensions were, a normal part of, the social reproduction of labour. Everybody's going to get sick, so you have a health service. Everybody's going to get old, so you have pensions. And, workers needed to be able to rely on a retirement income, whether that's provided by the state, which it was to some extent, but also provided privately. There needs to be some ability to depend on that future income, or your incentive to work is essentially undermined, and then capitalism kind of doesn't function if nobody's prepared to get out of bed and go to work. It was a sort of a happy accident because capitalism was an age of high and stable growth, so these things were deemed to be affordable. It was in the economic system, the interests of the capitalist class as well as the workers. And when that happy accident started to sort of unravel, it was the choice was between the profitability of capital and the welfare of workers, and the former was invariably chosen, as I say, not in sort of some big one-off decision, but step by step over a period of a couple of decades. And that's where we are now. What's happened now is that the workers have been told, you are capitalists. We still have this myth that we have a sort of collective pension scheme is provided by your employer, even in the US with the 401ks, which are about as far from sort of collectivized provision as you can possibly get. And the UK is starting to adopt some similar features. Provided by your employers, your employer will contribute to your pension scheme if you contribute in certain ways. But it's entirely individualized. So workers have had to become capitalists in order to secure what they used to get as a product of their contributions to the economy as part of their remuneration.
And I think that's something that you sort of talk about as well, which is part of, I think this sort of falls, correct me if I'm wrong, under what you call the kind of epidemic of misunderstanding around pensions, where the system that again, the Thatcher government put in place, and I would say the sort of Blair and then coalition governments sort of attempted to make a little bit nicer by, for example, auto-enrolling people in the most preferential rate and so on and so on. But that what essentially we did is we have operated on the fundamental premise that that somehow you as an individual have to take responsibility for things that for the macroeconomy, more or less, for the macroeconomic conditions that abide at the time of your retirement, and that it's a kind of swindle essentially. But your concept of the epidemic of misunderstanding is sort of bigger than just the idea that we are we're giving people individual responsibility to control things that it is completely impossible for them to meaningfully control. Also, this idea that, for example, if we don't do this, then a demographic time bomb will go off, and like four young workers will be paying for 60 million old people. So there's huge amounts of misunderstanding and sort of ideology and propaganda that get layered in here that facilitated this move to what is essentially a pre-broken system.
Yeah. I mean, there's the great myth that pensions provision is a form of deferred consumption. I mean, it's a spectacularly successful myth because it's partly true. Like you are putting money aside, whether you're doing that through paying taxes or contributing to a private pension, and you expect to get something at the end of it, and you do always get something at the end of it, even if it's not quite aligned with the promises that were made. So there's, a basic level is deferred consumption, but that idea contains a sense of certainty. That if I've got, if I put aside £100 now, I will get that £100 back in retirement, revalued for inflation or whatever form of indexation is used. But that simply isn't the case anymore, at least not for enough people. I think this helps us to understand what pensions was in the first place. It was never a sort of classic savings or insurance scheme. It was about the fact that as human beings, we sort of live constantly with uncertainty. If you're gonna live for 80 plus years, things are going to change in your life. The economy changes, society changes, policy regimes change, and that creates a huge amount of uncertainty around those precise mechanisms of retaining the approximate value of the savings that you've put away or the tax that you've paid. And then no individual can possibly control these things. No government can possibly control all of these things, or they have a few more levers than the individual. So what I talk about in my book is this temporal anchoring function. And it's only really the state the state in its various different forms in different countries can provide this temporal anchoring function, like taking responsibility for ensuring that the money that the income that you defer now has approximately the same value when you need it in retirement, taking on the burden of coping with uncertainty. Employers can also do that job to some extent, and they did for a few decades, and I think still should be doing it now, but slightly more understandable that they're not to the same extent. The one group who certainly can't take responsibility for this is the individual. It's obviously completely fallacious, the idea that an individual is able to cope with these sort of macro level uncertainties and make all the right decisions all the way along. And, it's just way too many variables for them to possibly be able to compute and control. The reason what we've ended up with this individual, the idea of the individual is the temporanka, the idea that the individual is always going to contribute to their pension. The reason we've ended up with that is, as you allude to, is this sense of demographic time bomb that was upon us, that employers and even the state couldn't possibly be expected to provide decent pensions for all anymore, because there were going to be too many pensioners. You've got increased life expectancy, you've got the baby boomers reaching retirement. So it was too much for these collective institutions to take on, and you had to put these pressures back on the individual, and the individual would respond, and it sort of creates a sort of market utopia where people act rationally by saving more.
If people sink or swim, the inherent assumption there is we need some people to sink.
I mean, that's the bit that's never said out loud, isn't it? But some people will sink. In the US, you've got the 401k system where people's savings are not sufficient for them to see out there in their entire lifetime in retirement, and some of those features are being imported to the UK with the pension freedoms. If everybody contributed at a sufficient scale into their private pension, you can more or less approximate what they're going to end up with, but they aren't going to. And a highly marketized system is very good at honing in on the customers, i.e., normal people who are going to provide them with the most opportunities for profit, and the ones that are very good at identifying the ones that won't, and have designed a system where they are providing the best services for those who are going to be the most profitable customers over the long term. That's where you need the state to step in, and it isn't doing so in the kind of timeliness necessary to prevent the coming epidemic of pensioner poverty, which we had sort of dealt with 10-20 years ago, and it's probably just 10-20 years in our future. We're already seeing the signs of it.
I mean, we see this as well, right? I mean, this is something that we've discussed many times before on the show, but anytime a sort of British newspaper will go and do a kind of, I don't know, you might say investigative reporting piece at an Amazon warehouse, the thing that they always remark upon is that the average age of the people working there is always very high, because as we sort of have accepted that in terms of pension savings, we need a certain amount of sinking in order to keep the system moving while being profitable for all the right people. That those who sink then end up sort of shocked back into the labor market, quite frequently in labor overproduction jobs, such as gig economy work if they can, or more often things like warehouse work. I mean, it was Walmart greeters was the stereotype in the US, right? Your 401k runs out, and then you're greeting people at Walmart, right? I mean, because there is a place for these people to be absorbed, and it's the same way that all overproduced labor gets absorbed, which is highly exploited, very low paid, poor condition work, and in many cases in these places that are often out of the way, right?
Absolutely, and in the UK, the success story was also always the B&Q greeters, sort of hardware, home improvement sort of store, and typically older men who had been tradesmen in their earlier career take on this job in retail, sort of advising customers about which tools to buy and how to fit a kitchen and so on. This was the great success story of how the workforce was responding to aging. But obviously, the numbers of people who were able to take on like jobs like that was extremely tiny, and most older workers were sort of in the hidden workforce that you're talking about, in the warehouses where, actually when they would like to think we're at their sort of peak earnings potential, actually we're taking enormous pay cuts in order to stay in work one way or another. That's partly because their pensions were not up scratch. Many will have been in good pensions. These essentially the younger boomers, the sort of forgotten generation when you think of the baby boomers as all hugely wealthy, but not so much. It seems, especially the sort of younger end of the boomer generation, who may have been in good pensions early in their career. They may have they may have been in the public sector early in their career, but so the last half of their career, they haven't had access to good pensions coverage. They're being forced to work for longer as a result. And I'm the first to say that if people want to work for as long as possible, they should be able to, and we should encourage that. But nobody should feel that they're forced to, especially when ill health and disability becomes a big factor for many people at that age. And one thing I would add is that this was just so unnecessary, because we were told that this was because we had to respond to sort of the baby boomers retiring was creating this aging society. So therefore, we couldn't afford their pensions anymore. But the baby boomers all had a lot of kids because they could afford to have kids. So those kids were the sort of demographic dividend. It's people like my age, people in their 30s now with boomer parents who there's loads of us, and we should have been able to sort of finance good pensions and replenish the system with contributions. But essentially, it's not because we couldn't afford to. We were not allowed to. The mechanisms by which we were able to do so were taken away.
And I think there's an important step back we can take as well to wonder, well, why is that? Why did that happen? And I think one of the effects is that now you cannot, if you want to talk about, say, nationalizing some thing that's often, let's say, invested in maybe by risk-averse asset managers such as pensions, you say, you can't nationalize the railway because that takes away, little old Doris's annuity, right? It means that instead of having the benefits and burdens of social cooperation be based on cooperation, we've sort of hardwired private ownership and so on into this, because we've kind of tied the bomb of private ownership around pensioners, essentially. So you can't get rid of it. He can't sit up. Britain can't step off this landmine of private ownership, or else it will blow up and destroy all the pensioners' annuities, because the solidarity element, the intergenerational solidarity element, has been removed.
Absolutely. And you see similar arguments around, like fossil fuel companies, where any threat to the profitability of polluters is a problem, because it's pension funds own all the shares in these companies. I mean, it isn't. It's exaggerated, but it's almost like the threat that's hanging over us when you have what I would see as a highly financialized pension system. And this was true of the golden age, the traditional occupational pension funds, as well as today. When you have a highly financialized system whereby our pensions are dependent on investment in the largest companies, the key industries of the economy, then it does breed conservatism in how you're able to respond to sort of change in the economy, or how you're able to sort of manage transition, because lo and behold, anybody threaten the pensions, and you'd like to think somebody stops to think, well, maybe it would have been better if our financial futures weren't put in that sort of kind of jeopardy in the first place, which was never necessary.
Yeah, I mean, with something you write, which is in the early pages of your book, and I think this is a sort of a sentiment that we've really thoroughly explored in the last sort of just under a half hour, which is rubbish pensions are an affront to our essential humanity. And I think we can sort of see that this idea that you shouldn't just basically sink or fuck off and die, or just keep going until you stop being useful to someone who counts, is something that I think if we all had a choice, we would want to feel like was happening for us. We would want to feel like we could, by working together, opt out of that. That we could all live the kinds of lives that we think are worthwhile, and that we could do that through cooperation rather than maintaining the sink or swim competitive element that is introduced, as you say, by essentially a lie, a falsehood, an idea that we are meaningfully competing as opposed to just buying a lottery ticket, essentially, right? And so I think that this really illuminates, what you say, that rubbish pensions are in fact an affront to our essential humanity, complicated though they may be.
It's you could say this about a lot of different parts of the economy. I don't want to say pensions are only or even our biggest problem. But yeah, I stand by that kind of statement, because it's that exploitation of just sort of biological function that we can't avoid. Getting old, and there will come a time when you can't contribute to the labour market in a way that's going to enable you to sort of meet your basic needs. So you have to have obviously increased life expectancy is kind of a good thing, that we're living longer. So until recently we were living longer anyway. So you need to have some sort of provision for people's financial security in later life that isn't just down to sort of good luck or your family helping you out, or the fortune of being able to work for longer, because many people are simply not able to. And for that to become a sphere of sort of competition and exploitation is really crap. And as I say, like, unnecessary. It's not a system that anybody would choose. It's a system that enriches, a few companies in a few industries, but is essentially completely irrational. If you're going to have the state, there are all kinds of things. I think the state should do a lot more things in our society and our economy, but there are all kinds of things I think the state could probably do a little bit less of. But if there's one thing you want the state to do a bit more of, it's to ensure that we're able to enjoy a slice of retirement before we die. There are question marks about when retirement should begin. I think we should all be grown up enough to accept that if people are living a lot longer and healthier for longer, then perhaps we should be retiring later. But the evidence suggests, of late, that isn't the case. That isn't something that we can rely upon anymore. So let's put the right foundations in place to, as I say, like, deal with the uncertainties, the things that we can never possibly control about the future. That's what pensions are and should be.
Well, I think this, if I want to sort of connect this to one of the last conversations I had in this vein, the one that I had with Dominic Loisder from LSE about a sort of energy pricing policy and how decisions sort of made in the late 80s and early 90s have led to the insane energy bills being faced sort of around the sort of broadly speaking West today, right? I think we can sort of see the same relationship with uncertainty, which is the mitigation of uncertainty for a small number of preferred players in the economy, people, and that is sold to the public with essentially the same kind of delirious optimism that because everything is going well now in this period of unprecedented capital expansion, that it will all continue to go well in the future. And so long as not one thing goes wrong at all ever, then this house of cards that we've built to replace the sort of solid foundations that we had will enable more people to, say, be sheltered for a lower material cost, if I can continue the house metaphor. But replacing bricks with, it's sort of now, it beggars belief that anyone would possibly have, swallowed that particular load of tripe, that cards could perform the same structural function as bricks, so long as, everything remained perfect and the world stopped turning. And yet, just as with energy, as with pensions, I'll go back to what we started at the beginning, right? Which is the reality of these schemes manifestly failing, making some people sink because of a kind of incorrect and cruel ideological belief that some people ought to preserve the rest of us when it's not, don't have to, is now, as I said, it's failing in front of our eyes. The defined contribution schemes, people are running dry. And now something else is going to have to be done, because the wild, irrational, risky gamble based on either delirious optimism or cynicism, or a combination of the two, appears to have once again run aground.
Absolutely. Just one just on the technical side of it, one difference between the UK and the US is that very, very sort of underdeveloped annuities market in the US. So people have their 401k savings and they draw down those savings in retirement. Whereas in the UK, typically you would, give your savings to an insurance company who would then pay you a regular income. There's problems in both ways of organising it. But if you're able to do that in the UK, then you won't necessarily run out of money before you die, but you will be living on, because the annuities market is essentially broken in the UK, you'll be living on much less than you kind of expected to or hope to. But the broader point, I couldn't agree more, and it's interesting if we're precise about when the key decisions were made in the UK. I think it's easy to say that the sort of Thatcher government and neoliberalisation was the source of all the problems, and there were steps taken along the way to this individualisation then. But it was essentially the new Labour government of the 2000s where the real damage was done.
Isn't it always?
And that's this is among political economists, it's kind of like a cliche that we didn't really have fully fledged neoliberalism until the Social Democrats got back in government. Same in the US as well with Clinton. Obviously. So the decisions that they made in the mid 2000s, like just before the financial crisis, so, there was a recognition that it was things could be a lot worse than they're about to be if the Labour government had done nothing, if they hadn't acted at all and just allowed people to just wholesale stop saving for a pension or just accepted that legacy of the Thatcher governments, which is a very real prospect. So things could have been worse if they'd done nothing. What they decided to do was, bet the house on a highly financialized system whereby financial services providers, through market mechanisms, would always be able to provide, a pension which was comparable to anything that the state could provide or anything that was previously provided, via employers in the occupational pension system. And, with the financial crisis, 2007, 2008, that led to a rethinking of a lot of assumptions about how stable the finance sector was and, how reliable the products that it offers to the customers were in lots of ways. But strangely, that sort of rethinking never entered the sort of pensions terrain, and we just sort of went ahead with it. Now, in advance of auto enrollment, this defined contribution pensions being sort of rolled out, there were serious debates about whether or not the state should provide these new schemes, and whether or not we should have, yes, defined contribution, but it be notional defined contribution like they have in Sweden, whereby it looks like people are saving and getting in what they get out, but actually the state is managing all of the risks ultimately. There were serious debates about whether or not the state should become a giant insurance company and provide annuities to people, so you always know that you're getting a fair price. Obviously a system therefore not run on profit. But invariably, whenever these sort of possibilities cropped up, the Labour government chose to go down the route that was as marketised as possible. And, that was partly because of sort of ideological zealotry. I wouldn't rule out that explanation, but it's also partly because the analysis suggested it was just as good. It was, the financial sector was going to produce outcomes which were just as good as anything the state could provide, because you had 20 or so years of, boom in the finance sector, and nobody could imagine that it would ever end.
Like, even though I've flipped this coin 19 times, and it's always been heads.
Yeah, and it's not like the private pension system has failed to get off the ground since then. It has got off the ground and is delivering products, but the kind of outcomes that people are going to be retiring in the next 10, 20, 30 years are nothing like what was anticipated when this system of automatic enrollment was put in place in the mid-2000s for all kinds of reasons. It's just the ability to think beyond the immediate present circumstances was just absent, which is just so frustrating.
Well, I think that's brought us around, actually, I think, to a nice little stopping point that we can put a little bow on. It came down to being unable to live outside of yourself. So, Dr. Barry, I want to thank you so much for coming on and chatting with me today. This has been extremely interesting. And you out there in podcast land, take a look at your pension, because the state sure fucking isn't going to. Where can people find you online, and possibly even if they are interested, take a look at your book?
between gigs at the moment. So yeah, you mentioned that I'm joining UCL, but I'm starting there in a couple of weeks. So I'm curiously off grid. But you can find my book on it from all good retailers and some not so good retailers, as well as Pensions Imperiled, published by Oxford University Press.
So you heard it here first. Buy book early, buy book often, but not before contributing to your pension. I'm going to throw back to either myself or my hooting co-hosts in the future past to take us home. Bye, everyone.
Well, that was really informative, deeply intellectually stimulating.
I've never been so
Every
informed.
second of it. And you know what I love is hearing this joke every time this happens. It's good every time. And now that I'm doing it, I agree.
You know, staying for that half-hour segment has made me really late for the show, but I'm just going to say, worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. I just love sitting there in total silence.
So thank you again for listening. We have a Patreon. It's $5 a month. You can get bonus episodes to include Britanology, and we have a second Patreon tier at $10 a month that gives you a second Britanology per month. Also, we've got live shows. When this comes out, Milo will still be doing his Edinburgh Fringe show, so go to that if you're in Edinburgh. We have a show on the 26th of August. It is sold out at the Edinburgh Fringe.
Don't come to that.
No.
You will be turned away.
Unpacking my suitcase as we speak.
However, we also have our tour of Australia, which is basically sold out in Melbourne, but there's a second night in Brisbane, and Sydney tickets have just gone on sale. All the links are in the show notes. Hopefully soon I will have a show link for Canberra. But until then, we really appreciate you being listeners, and we will talk to you next week.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.